Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Is What It Takes. I'm your co-host, Michael Macniak, and I'm here as usual with my dear friend and partner, Victoria Cure. We're very pleased this week to offer you a really interesting guest that I had the pleasure of meeting a couple weeks ago, who is a fellow attorney. Don't hold it against him either.
Mhm.
And Mark Astor is here. He's with Astor Simovich Law, which is the mental health addiction law firm. He's based out of Florida, but he does a lot of work for many folks all over the country. And he fields a lot of phone calls from people who are in very unique situations that I find a lot of my clients in. We're going to talk with Mark about his practice and the interesting work that he's done in his career. Mark, welcome.
Michael, it's good to be here. Victoria, nice to see you too. I'm excited to be here, especially with a fellow attorney.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for being here. I feel so
Yeah,
left out.
you're the one that's excited to be with the lawyer, huh? Yeah. So, Mark, other than being here and seeing Victoria, because I know it's not me, what's got you fired up? What are you doing these days that's really got your juices flowing? And in addition to your really good podcast, talk about that for a second too, if you would.
Yeah, so I am, along with my wife, the co-founder of a law firm. We're based here in South Florida. We have a couple of offices, one in Orlando, one in Jacksonville, and actually we have one in Boston too. And the mission of the firm is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. So we speak to families from all over the country, certainly, that New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, the Midwest. We've had calls from Hawaii and California, Oregon, and it's usually mums and dads who call us. And it's because they have somebody in the family, usually an adult child, with a long history of drug use, mental illness, treatment that doesn't work, if they'll even go. They're probably med non-compliant. They may well have been a guest of the state through either the criminal justice system or the mental health system, and maybe even an overdose. And the families call us and say, we're done. We can't take the chaos. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Can you help us? Usually the answer is yes. But Michael, as you know, recovery is a journey. It's not a destination. I mean, families say, can you wave a magic wand? I can, but you won't see the results probably for somewhere between 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, and I
So,
see that a lot too. If you're going to
yeah,
commit to us because this is not something that you're going to see results in a
it
few
doesn't work that
months.
way. It just simply doesn't
Doesn't.
work that way.
And just trying to understand the issues and breaking into the system accordingly takes 3 to 4 months, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you stop working out, you know, it's like it took you years to get this fat. How are you gonna it's not just gonna go away that quickly.
That's a great analogy. The other one I use is, when I talk to families and say, well, look, God forbid you had cancer, right? I mean, you wouldn't do 30 days of chemo or 30 days of any treatment and say, oh, I'm good to go. I can go back. I can smoke. I can drink. I can eat, but I can eat
Yeah, yeah,
McDonald's every day. You wouldn't do that, right? You'd look for a long-term treatment prognosis that not only helps you experience remission, but keeps you in remission. And that's the trick with any kind of behavioral health issue. We want to experience recovery, but be able to maintain it for the rest of our life because we want to try and get it right the first time if we can.
yeah.
And isn't it true that on the average, it doesn't always go right the first time? It's you're always in a phase of recovery, just like in cancer, you're always in a phase of remission. And so there's things that you need to do on a daily basis to ensure that you stay in your recovery the way that you need to.
Yeah, Victoria, that is such a great point. I mean, one of the things that we've been incredibly blessed to experience over the last 10 years is we made a lot of really close friends who are in the recovery space. And those that are in recovery for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or even longer, there's one core theme that they all do, and that is to work on their recovery every single day. One of my closest guy friends, probably my closest guy friend now, he's been in recovery for 20 plus years. There's not a week that goes by that I don't call him at least once, and he's like, "Got to call you back. I'm in a meeting." So it's 100% right, and I think for some families, like, "Oh, we didn't realize this. We thought we could just we'll put them in treatment for 30 days and it'll be over."
Mm.
No,
No.
it doesn't work that way.
Well, and one of the other things that you just said that's perfect is we thought we would just put them in treatment. Yeah, how are you going to get them in treatment? You know, I mean,
And keep them there.
that's my point, right? I mean, so I want to break some of that down with you today because the magic wand is something, the magic wand question is something that I get all the time. Up my way, we call it a conservator. Down your way, you call it a guardian, where folks are, basically giving the authority to make decisions for and in the best interest of another, i.e., mother and father making decisions for their adult child. When it comes to addictions or mental health treatment, etc. So somehow it got put into people's brains, and maybe this used to be the way of the world back 30, 40, 50 years ago, that, hey, I'm now the conservator, and hey, I'm now the guardian. I mandate that you go into this facility, i.e., rehab or even mental health facility. Number one, as I say, how are you going to get him there if he doesn't want to go? Number two, have you spoken to the facility about this yet? So that's the first piece where you just mentioned this magic wand. There is no magic wand, folks. And having the designation from as a court appointed conservator slash guardian does not thereafter give you the magic wand or the teachings that Harry Potter and his friends went to whatever magic school. I was not a Harry Potter guy. Sorry. So one of the things that well, let's talk about this one first, because I think we could relate to this one on some level, the Marchman Act in Florida. All right. So tell people about what the Marchman Act is in Florida, because it's not a federal act. It's a state act. Talk about that for a minute synopsis of the Marchman Act.
Yeah, so the Marchman Act, as you correctly pointed out, Michael, is a statute that is unique to Florida. Other than Kentucky, which has Casey's Law, and Massachusetts has Section 35, there's really nothing quite like it. And it is a statute that allows a family to petition the court to put somebody into treatment for periods of up to 90 days, where there is a primary substance use disorder. So we're going to have some drug use, and that has to be primary. But it also contemplates co-occurring mental illness as well, and the statute has evolved in that direction, because these days, if there's substance use, there's almost certainly mental illness. And so that has to be taken into account for the most part. I very rarely see unless it's somebody who has an alcohol disorder, but even then there's some type of mental health component. But it's really designed for where there's a primary substance use disorder. What I think is neat about it, or cool about it, us lawyers, we geek out over this stuff, is there's an assessment period. And that assessment period can be initiated on an ex parte emergency basis, meaning we file our petition, the court looks at it and says, looks good to me, and they send law enforcement out to go and get the person and basically collect them off the streets and take them to a place of safety where we can keep them secure and get them assessed and get them stabilized and get them detoxed. So a lot of the time we can initiate this without telling them, oh, this is coming down the pipe. Because if you do that, a lot of the time, they're just going to flee. They're going to run. And now we're playing catch up. And so that's what's neat about it. And it's been a very useful piece of legislation for us. These days, while I'm a fan of it, I think it gives us limited control. And these days, I think you need a lot of control.
Well, let me talk about that from two perspectives, because that's on the front end of getting somebody into treatment, right? So we as a family, the three of us get together and we decide, hey, we really need to do something for Jane Doe. And we decide that we're going to institute an action under the Marchman Act to try to get her picked up, evaluated, treated, hopefully in an inpatient setting, because, that tends to be more.
At least at the beginning, for sure.
So we have a statute that's been on our books forever in Connecticut. And I don't, without having done the research, I don't know about laws in every other state, obviously. But some of the interesting pieces of the law that we have in Connecticut that are basically the same thing. Well, number one, it doesn't get used.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
And number two, well, I'll tell you why it doesn't get used. Because the first piece of it is, and it's the hardest to overcome, is that you have to have a bed or a facility that says that they have a bed and they're ready, willing, and able to accept the person. So in this case, Jane Doe. We call up Bristol Hospital and say, Bristol, we have a patient. We need a long-term rehab bed. Can you pick them up? Can you take them? So we take that, we get the yes, we take the information to the court. Then the court says, okay, well, and then you got to meet all the other criteria as terms of immediate need and all this. So you're running into a bunch of problems there. Number one, who the hell am I that's going to get through to, I mean, not me personally, but I'm Joe Blow off the street. I'm calling about my daughter. Who's going to take my call and give me the access to these beds that are like gold, right?
Yep.
That's number one. Number two, how am I going to time this with the court in such a way that we can get this done and quickly enough so that that bed doesn't get taken? Because folks, we all know how quickly beds get taken. So those are two of the problems that we have enforcing our law here. And the second piece of the statute basically says, and this is really easy to overcome, I think. The statute says something along the lines of, there has to be a probability that the intervention will have a positive impact on the patient or will work, basically. I've actually argued against a social services law firm, let's just leave it at that, who went into court and says, well, she's been through this 16 times before. What makes you think it's going to work this time? And I looked at the lawyer and I was like, you're really arguing this right now? And the judge looked at her and asked the same question. Like, I know you're doing your job as a lawyer, but we're going to let this override.
It doesn't the 16 failures suggest to us that we do need to do it for the 17th time?
That's pretty much the easiest thing.
Let me ask the question as not a lawyer, because so many people who listen aren't at that level of intelligence as a lawyer. Let me ask you this to both of you. So to a family that is in this crisis mode at the moment with their family member or loved one, is this kind of like a 1013 where you're calling and asking for crisis management to come out and to 1013 that individual at that point where they take them in for evaluation and then hopefully put them into a facility? Is that kind of what this is semblance of? So that like we could kind of have a
1013 is probably referring to your state statute.
Right. But I'm saying like for people who are listening and they're thinking, oh, when this happens and I call the police and they take them and it gets escalated and it becomes a violent situation. Is this kind of the same thing?
This sounds like our Baker Act, Michael, where the state can step in and because of a mental health crisis. Am I right about that?
Well, I don't know. Every state's different. She's in a state closer to you.
Where
I'm
are
in
you?
Georgia. I'm in Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my apologies. I thought you were also in Connecticut, but
no.
It sounds like that's some type of mental health law. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's a crisis intervention law. Is
it for substance use or is it for mental health? Because we have a separate mental health law here.
See, we have just the mental health. Like I actually am advocate where I go on scene and I will actually call in crisis management and they will come in and they will 1013. They will involuntarily take the individual, restraint or not, and put them into a facility for evaluation where that's how it goes. And so I'm wondering, is this the same thing? Because every state is different, like you guys are saying. And so many people who are listening are kind of trying to figure out, is that what they're referencing?
Well, okay. I know that all states now have been given a grant through SAMHSA to train their officers in crisis intervention. And every state, I assume, has a different name or a different code or a different, law that they've written to go along with how we can respond in these temporary crises. We just call it our crisis intervention teams or whatever. I don't even know what they would call it in Florida or.
Well, so we have two separate laws here in Florida. We have the Marchman Act, which is specific for substance use, and then we have the Baker Act, which is specific for mental health crisis. Now, not to get into the weeds, Michael, but both of them can be initiated the same way. As Victoria pointed out, right? I could pick up the phone, cops come, they take them away. The Marchman Act is there's only one county I've ever experienced where if you go in, say, for a substance use related overdose, where the hospital, not the family, will initiate that detention, right? As a general rule, the Marchman Act is initiated by a private cause of action between family and loved one. That's how it's typically done. Whereas the Baker Act is rarely done that way. It's normally where somebody picks up the phone and calls 911 or somebody went to the emergency room. It's supposed to be for a mental health crisis. Does it get abused? Absolutely. And we could spend 40 hours talking about that. But
Well, and that's why Victoria and I were excited about this talk with you, because there are so many layers to this, and I don't want to get too far into weeds for everybody, but this is important stuff to be able to differentiate, because there are laws on the books that say, here's what we're going to do to respond. And this is, I can play devil's advocate and argue with you about whether or not Marchman is a good act in terms of civil liberties, but I won't, because I believe that
yeah,
it is in terms of rescuing people who otherwise are not themselves. So let's put that aside.
we could definitely have
Let's
that
say
debate.
that we agree on all these.
And I can stand on both sides of that debate too. So I hear what you're
Yeah,
saying.
right. I mean, I think that, wiser people can agree that these things could both be true at the same time. I think that when you look at the way that they're designed to really help people who are struggling, that's what it's all about. You have to take away this overarching cloud of my civil liberties sometimes, unfortunately, and say, I won't have any civil liberties if I'm dead, kind of a thing. I call it dying with your rights on, and I really believe in that.
Yeah, and actually, they amended the Marchman Act statute back in 24 to reflect some of those concerns. So I mean, I think your point's well taken. I hear this all the time. How can they do that? How can they do that? But in any time we are taking away a right, there's a balancing act, right? I mean, we've got the person's rights over here versus what's good public policy type of thing. So I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a very fair argument.
We have laws on the books, folks, that will allow you to call the police to make, let's say, an emergency intervention. That exists. You're concerned. We haven't heard from my daughter. We know she's doing heroin. She could be dead in her house. Please do a wellness check and go over there. That crisis for drug abuse, right? Or the guy's known to be floridly psychotic. We haven't heard from him. I have all these cases in my back pocket, that I've heard of and or worked on over 25 years or 30 years. Please do a wellness check and go out there and check on him. And if need be, you bring him to the hospital, to the emergency room. We could do the same, so those go both ways. And you're talking about two different statutes, but I think that we're talking pretty much the same stuff. The nice thing about your Marchman Act is that it gives the next level, which is, okay, we've determined that you are gravely disabled or danger to yourself or others. I'm just throwing out legal jargon that
you're on the spot.
That's what we use here.
Yeah, we do too.
So now we're going to enact this Marchman Act, and we're going to take the appropriate action, i.e., get a physician's emergency certificate to put you into the hospital for further evaluation. And then from there, we'll see how things go. Then on the backside of it, there's also states that have these acts that they call outpatient commitment statutes, where, let's say in this case, I'm asking, this is a long question, Mark. You know how I could get.
We're lawyers.
Let's say a guy goes through the process of crisis intervention. Marchman Act reaches out to him. He gets into a facility. They put together a plan. And now again, we're talking substance abuse at this point. And arguably, I think they could both really fall under the same banner. So let's just talk about it that way. Does Florida have a statute whereby if our Jane Doe starts to go off of the plan and go back to substances, stops seeing her treaters, stops reporting into almost like a probation officer, we'll call it for lack of a better term, does Florida have a law where we can then say, well, we're going to go and get you, or we're going to enact that law right now, we're going to bring you back and have you checked out in the facility again?
Yeah, I mean, because these are private, actions, causes of action typically, yeah, I mean, we can go in. One of the things that I think that makes it work is the enforceability, right? We have a court order that says Mark's going to treatment for the next 90 days, and whatever level of care Mark's at, Mark doesn't do what he needs to be done. So now the judge brings us back in. We obviously file something, and the court says, hey, Mark, I sent you to treatment for, up to 90 days. You were supposed to do outpatient, and I have witness here that says you didn't show up for the last 2 weeks. We have to have a conversation about that, because my order to send you to treatment was not optional, right? It wasn't like you could do it if you want or not if you don't want to. I said you're going. So here's the deal. I'm going to find you. I'm going to hold you in contempt, and I'm going to give you an option. I mean, I guess I could put you. I could put you in some kind of county jail, or I could put you in a lockdown type facility, or you could go back into treatment, and I'll purge the contempt. So there's enforceability. Now, in all the years I've done this, Michael, I don't think I've ever had anybody that went to jail, primarily because, and I always say this, right, that people leave treatment typically because the food sucks. So if the food's good in treatment and it's crappy in the county jail, they'll probably choose treatment. So most people, anybody I've ever experienced said, I'd rather go back to treatment. Nobody wants to sit in the county jail. But it's the enforceability that makes it work. That's it.
Okay. Victoria, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No. Mine's about the mental health. I'll get there.
Well, yeah, I mean, right. So I agree with you that the enforceability is huge. That's why I wish we can liken it to probation, because if you violate probation, you don't go to the probation officer. It is a type of probation. It's like a civil probation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's great. Connecticut is one of, I think, 6 states that does not have an outpatient commitment statute, and we never will, because of the arguments that you and I were going to make on both sides of the coin before. I don't think it'll ever happen in Connecticut, but all the surrounding states do. And I know, and here's where we get to the enforceability question. New York, Kendra's law, it's on the books, but they don't use it because it's very expensive and very hard for them to enforce it. Well, go ahead.
You mentioned Connecticut. It sounds like the statute you have on the books there in Connecticut is similar to what they have in Massachusetts, whether it's sort of Section 35, which is their Marchman Act, or Section 12, which is their Baker Act. Especially with the Section 35, you have to go to a designated Section 35 facility. Some of that's set up by the county. What makes the Marchman Act, I think, very different is they can be placed into a private facility, one that's either the family pays for or there's insurance. You can use the county facility, but like the point that you made, Michael, is, can we get a bed? And if we're going to use a county facility, I'm going to call the county facility and say, look, I'm filing this. Do you have a bed? Because otherwise I have a court order and I can't enforce it because there's no bed available. So yes, if there's resources or insurance, that can make that gives a family options, but it's not always something that's available. Not every family has that. Where, so if it's a mental health hold, you're going to the county facility. The judge sends you going to, because every county has those county mental health lockups. So that's what I think makes the Marchman Act different, but not everybody has resources.
But what's the, okay, so you have the enforceability that the judge is willing to say, hey, you didn't do this. We're going to send law enforcement out to pick you up and bring you back to a facility, via a jail or to a rehab center. As I said, New York, I know because I talked to a lot of people down there, because it's, an hour from my house or whatever. They can't. It's too expensive. It's too time consuming for them to implement it, given the number of, listen, it takes them almost a year to get through a guardianship application. So, if that's your basis for, it takes us maybe a month, right? Maybe it takes up to a year down there. So it's no wonder that it's very difficult and expensive and for them to enforce it. But I have heard that that's a big pushback throughout the country on these outpatient, after we're out and we're in treatment. The big pushback is maybe it's enforceable, but is it being enforced? I guess is the question. Do you find that when you get calls from around the country?
Well, so that brings up a different issue, right? For instance, I had a case once, Michael, where I had a guy he had one of probably the worst substance use disorder I've ever seen. The guy was in his late 30s. If you saw him, he looked like he was 70 years old. He walked like a 70-year-old. He'd been using so long that his brain was so damaged. It had affected his motor skills. And we put him in treatment. He violated the court order 3 times, and I could not get the magistrate who heard the case to basically lock him down for his own safety. And what happened? The guy overdosed and died. And the family called me and said, "Can we do anything?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, we'd like to sue the magistrate." No, I'm not. No, and I'm no.
Not with me, you can't.
Yeah, you got it. I don't go down that path. I mean, we work within the parameters of the system, and it is what it is. That's it. So not every judge wants to
No.
enforce things. Some judges will say, "Okay, Mr. Astor, if you think there's a violation, you need to file a motion. You need to notice the person because they're entitled to due process, right? Because you want me to take away the freedom, right?" I've had another judge in a different part of the state. If we file a motion, he just issues a bench warrant, like a criminal capias, and says, "Go and get him and put him in the county jail, and then we can have a hearing." So again, I mean, it's know your judge, know the county you're in. Different judges in different counties handle these things differently.
And that sucks. I mean, it's great for you and I who know the judges and know what their tendencies are, but it sucks for the people who are, you try to find continuity and consistency in applying these laws, and
There
you
is
know,
none.
there is none. Everyone's its own fiefdom, and it's difficult. And that's, I think, one of the frustrations that people run into. But I mean, again, we can go down that road all afternoon. I mean, we can tell war stories until we're blue in the face,
We
right?
could.
What do we have together? 60 years of doing this work. But and throw in Victoria's advocacy work, we've got a lot more than that. So tell us about the Baker and what Baker does for folks.
Yeah. So the Baker Act is a statute here in Florida that allows the state to step in and basically grab somebody and make them a temporary ward of the state when there's an allegation of some type of mental health crisis. Something like they're suicidal, right? They tried to commit suicide. They tried to self-harm. I've had people that took too many pills. I had one mom who came home, found her son hanging from the ceiling. I've had people that, especially minors who cut themselves or tried to self-harm. That's what we're talking about. And basically, if law enforcement get called to the scene or if you ended up in an emergency room, right? Those are licensed agents of the state's mental health system, and they can detain you for an initial period of up to 72 hours. Now, I've been down that road because it happened to a family member of mine a couple of days after I lost my father. And you talk about civil liberties. I file about 250 to 300 cases every year to get people out of the Baker Act, because the problem with it is that once you are Baker Acted, nobody actually knows you're there. There's no oversight. And so you basically go into this sort of big black hole, which is Florida's mental health system. And unless either the facility, the agent of the state, files to keep you past 72 hours, or the family calls me and I drag the facility into court, nobody knows you're there. So they can do whatever they want, literally whatever they want, forcibly medicate you, lock you up, violate your rights. And it's a real problem here. And so when it comes to civil liberties, I'm totally on board with the abuse that goes on in Florida's mental health system. And every county has these lockdown facilities, and they're hellholes for the most part. They're worse than the county jail. You're better off to be in the criminal system, because at least if you get arrested, you get a first appearance within 24 hours, right? You see a judge, they address probable cause, right to counsel. You don't get any of that stuff if you get sucked into Florida's mental health system. And because they're agents of the state, Michael, as a general rule, absent you being physically damaged, because obviously they have a duty to keep you safe, you can't sue them for this stuff. Good luck. You're not getting any money. And I get 2 or 3 calls every day. I want to sue the facility.
Yeah.
Can't help you.
Right. Victoria's coming out of her seat over there because you're getting into one of her. If I have to hear how many times people are getting pinned down and medicated, go ahead, Victoria. I know you want to jump all over this one.
No, I'm listening, and it just, you think that we could get this under better control for everybody, because I see so many times, and I won't go through the whole story again, but I talk about how I had to 1013 a 6-year-old little girl, and it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because she was planning on jumping out of the moving vehicle on the way home, and she was serious. Like, it wasn't a cry for help. She was serious, and she got lost in the system. And no matter how hard I was advocating, I mean, she's 6, but she was spot on in every way that this is what she was going to do. And the system failed her.
You had a
And
plan.
the families don't know what to do.
Well, here's the deal, Victoria. I hear what you're saying, and I've represented children as young as that too, who made some kind of comment online or they made a comment in school, and the next thing you know, the school says, "Okay, we're calling the police. Let's get them out of here because we can't take the chance." So I hear what you're saying. I think when that happens, it's incumbent on the family to say, okay, there may be a problem here. We need to address it. Because at some point, if you don't address this issue, the state will do it for you. And if you get taken enough times, they won't give you back. You get locked up and sent to a state hospital. And I get those calls too. And talk about one flew over the cuckoo's nest. I mean, we're talking about a state hospital. It sounds like an insane asylum when people call. And the abuse that I hear about is it's outrageous. So I always tell families, if there's a problem, you're going to need to address it because if you don't do it, unless something tragic happens, the state's going to do it for you, and you won't like the consequences of that. You won't like what you get back if you get them back.
It's
almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because the situation that I was in is I was there and I was advocating against a woman who was abusive to her husband and their 6 children.
Yeah,
So
that's your situation. I was thinking the same thing, right? I mean, her situation was there was no way this mother and father were taking care of themselves, never mind their kids. But
Yeah, I mean,
to Mark's point is, yeah, folks, in other words, educate yourselves, learn the tricks of the trade, listen to podcasts like ours and like Mark's, and learn how to advocate for yourself in a way that's not going to lead you down. Do it before it's too late because the consequences can really be not what you want. They
yeah,
can, yeah, not pretty.
Mark,
you know,
I
I
have a
think,
question. I have a question
yes,
for you.
sure.
So, as an advocate for special needs and survivors of any type of abuse, I deal with a lot of, going down that road of guardianship. And so I'm going to talk about one of my clients, for instance, so maybe you could give insight. So in the state of Georgia, when this individual it was a young man, before he turned 18, they kept telling him that the family needed to go after guardianship. So they went to neuropsychology and had the eval and everything done from like 10 up. And they said, oh, about a year and a half before they turn 18, we need to do one more eval. Then you go to court before they're 18 and we start the process for guardianship. So they had executive function disorder, cognitive delay. There was a whole bunch of mental issues that were going on that really was a no brainer, that the family needed guardianship over their son. And so the year and a half before this young man turned 18, they went back to the neuro eval. This just went a whole thing. And then the same neuropsychiatrist from inception who stated, go get guardianship, was like, I don't know. But their IQ was not at the mental, I hate the word retarded, but I mean, their IQ is about 60, this young man. And they tell him at the end, oh, right at the very end, like 2 weeks before he was turning 18, I don't know if you really need guardianship, but this individual can't tell time, can't cook. They've said you can't cook because they forget the stove is on. They forget how to leave close the refrigerator door. There's all these different things. So what do you do when you're going under the direction of your team, your medical team, who've said from inception, and most families don't even know about guardianship if it's not put and presented to them. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, they're told, I don't know, it's kind of borderline. He can't cook, he can't clean, he can't do anything for himself, but we're kind of not thinking that guardianship would be the way to go, even though they can't do anything with money, they can't drive. Then what do they do after they turn 18?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on which state you're in, who your experts are. I mean, Michael will tell you, you can never take the human element out of the work that we do, right? In any field of legal practice. But I mean, to me, if they've got somebody who can't manage the basic functions of life, and you've got somebody who says, well, you don't really need a guardianship. I mean, to me, maybe you need to go and talk to some different people because somebody like that ends up having, something tragic happens, and then the state does step in, right?
Well, now the individual's over 18. He is over 18. And so going and getting a guardianship at this time over the age of 18 is going to be a little more challenging than it would have been before. I mean, because the process has to start all over because this person who had been treating him since they were 3 now is like, I don't think guardianship is the way to go because you're taking away their right to ever, go sign into a contract or ever get married. But this
Yep.
individual has the mental capacity of a young little boy. And so the doctor changed his mind. And so then you
Mhm.
have to go out and get an outside source. And a lot of people don't have the financial means for that, and the insurance won't cover it. So then what can somebody do?
I mean, their hands may be tied. I mean, to me, so if it's not going to be the family, then it's going to need to be the state, right? Stepping in. Now, I don't know I'm not familiar with all of the different laws in all the different states,
Sure.
but I mean, here in Florida, if you petition for guardianship over somebody, the court will appoint experts. Three of them, we call them an examining committee, and it's those court-appointed experts that are going to make the decision, right? If two of the three say, "Yep, you need guardianship," then it's going to get granted. So we're not necessarily relying on a family's ability to pay for, an expert to come out and do the assessment. I mean, I think the other issue, Victoria, is let's say the court grants guardianship. Okay, now where is this person going to reside? Who's going to pay for it? Do we have the ability to get some kind of governmental benefits that will pay for it, right? And one of the reasons to get guardianship is so that you can now apply for benefits on that person's behalf and you know, get Uncle Sam to chip in and start paying some of the bills to support,
Right.
right? So,
See, Mark, that was the problem, is because this individual client that I was trying to help the family, that they were more than prepared. It was they're a very loving family. I'm still in touch with them now, that they were going to allow him to reside with them ongoing. Like, they weren't trying to put him into a home or anything like that. He did and does get Social Security. He's on disability, but they were just trying to prevent him from being able to just like, oh, I'm going to go move out. I'm going to go get my own place, because they won't, I mean, like, this person couldn't, survive being on their own. They wouldn't be able to know, oh, that's gas I smell somewhere. They wouldn't be able to mentally recognize those things. And
yeah,
so they were more than prepared to let them stay with them. And they were just trying to prevent their son from getting out there, going and go sign a contract that he couldn't understand, or go out there and get an apartment and be on his own. But the system failed him.
and I think part of the problem is, as Michael said, there's no uniformity. And I'll give you an example. So we have a case right now where we have the family called us. They are residents of Florida. They have a 20-year-old daughter. She's a resident of Florida. She has a severe eating disorder. And if we don't get her back into treatment, probably within the next 90 days, I think she'll probably be dead, to be perfectly blunt. Okay, this has been going on for a long time. Now, she happens to be residing in Pennsylvania. She's in college up there, and she told the family, "I'm not coming back." So I said to the family, there's a couple of options, right? Because guardianship in Florida can be filed based on your residency, not necessarily where you're located. So I said, we could do one or two things. We could file in Florida. We got to put her on notice. Then the question is, if we do get guardianship over her, how do we get her down here? Well, we could, in theory, domesticate. In other words, get a Pennsylvania court to recognize it, and the court would then say, okay, you got to go with your parents, or we initiate the guardianship in Pennsylvania. So we start there instead of in Florida. So I spoke to a lawyer up there and I said, how do you guys handle this situation? He said, well, I'm going to need an expert to go into court with us. And I'm like, well, we don't do that in Florida. You could file for emergency guardianship without an expert. And once the permanent guardianship process moves along, the court's going to appoint the experts. We don't need one. He said, no, in Pennsylvania, you gotta bring in an expert to tell the court why you need guardianship, at least on a temporary basis. So the family's going to have to hire somebody, like the point you were making, Victoria, who can tell the court, yep, in my opinion, they need guardianship. And so the question is, how we've had this conversation, what tactically is the best way to do this? I think we start in Florida and then we look to domesticate if the girl's not going to come down here willingly. So, because I think it's too much of a faff to deal with the court in Pennsylvania to start it up there. And it's not unusual. I mean, we've had cases down here in Florida where we're in Florida, we're also in Massachusetts, and we're going backwards and forwards. And now the issue is, well, which court has jurisdiction? The Massachusetts court says, we don't want it, go to Florida. The Florida court says, hold on a second, you started in Massachusetts. Let the judge up there, let him worry about it.
Well, and
So,
I think that goes
right,
back
I
to
mean, there's so many variables.
and I'm sitting here screaming at the top of my lungs while you
We're
guys are
just trying
talking.
to save the person.
Yeah, well, that's just it. We're just trying to save this person. But meanwhile, I'm also thinking, all right, so let's say we domesticate, let's say we get guardianship, whichever one of the two bad choices you have to make. Okay, great. How the hell are we going to get her here? What are we going to have the police going pin her down? Are we going to give her a shot and knock her out? No, we're not. We can't do that either. That brings in a whole other set of laws. So it just that's why that magic wand we were talking about before just doesn't exist. And I make, as much as it sucks to say this to people, you do have to get created. You do have to know from Victoria's perspective what she's done in advocacy, what Mark's done, and what I've seen. It's just becomes there's so many layers to this onion. And I think that we're going to need to schedule a part 2 of this discussion, because there's like, we haven't even really gotten into the meat of the topics that I wanted to cover with Mark. But I do want to touch on one thing before we wrap up this session. Well, 2 things. First question, Mark, is one of the things that Victoria and I questioned each other about late last night, well, late to me, not late to her, was one of the things that Mark does is he goes after hospitals. Is this correct? Do you go after hospitals that are keeping people, basically bilking the system to get Medicaid or Medicare money? Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I told you I file 250, 300 cases a year to get people out. And if I was to file 100 cases, 99.9% of them would be where there is some type of insurance, whether it's, government insurance, private insurance, veterans insurance. That is normally the incentive, right? If there's money there, they want to keep the person. And I hate to say it, but some of these facilities will lie, cheat, and steal. They will fabricate things in medical records. They will say things that are simply not true because there's no recourse.
Okay. So the thing that's mind-blowing to me, I mean, really mind-blowing, and Victoria raised the same issue just in a different way. We have, and this, I think this, well, let me just say this issue first. We cannot get people to keep folks in the hospitals. And so I was blown away that you have the issue that they're keeping them too long. We can't get them to keep them.
Well, sometimes what'll happen is a family will initiate a Baker Act, because you can initiate it by going to court and petitioning the court, and the court will issue an ex parte order, and the cops will come take the person, right? So sometimes the family, believing that the person would get treatment, file this thing, and I tell them it's not a treatment statute. It's designed for emergency stabilization only. Or sometimes the person really needs to be locked down in a secure facility, and now the family is saying, I can't get the facility to keep them, to your point. And they say, what can you do? And my answer is, we could file for guardianship, but if you're asking me to step into that universe, that arena, I can't, because you are not a party to this. This is the state versus your loved one. And I don't get to tell the state to keep the person.
Or any hospital for that matter.
Right. I mean, I can make you want to pay me to make a phone call, fine, but they're going to say, well, who the hell are you? Who do you represent? Well, I represent the parents. Well, they're not a party to this. Goodbye. And we can't discuss it anyway because it's privileged.
Well, and there's another problem.
Mm-hmm.
There's another problem. This lack of communication, this lack of inclusion of the family, who are the ones that are winding up taking the person into their home under Victoria's. You had this magnanimous family that was willing to take the individual into the home, which, by the way, is a unicorn.
Yes.
But that family who's living with the person 24 hours a day is put on the list of people that we expect as a resource, but we're not going to include them in the say of the treatment planning. And there's just so many things that this we just keep digging. We got to stop digging, or else we're.
This is why, at least in Florida, the guardianship is a very powerful tool. It is, right? Because that's the statute that we use, well, specifically for behavioral health issues. And it wasn't always that way. I'm going to if you get me to come back, I'm going to bring my wife. I always joke, she's the guru of guardianship. I mean, she's brilliant with this stuff. But I always tell families, look, if you want to have control, either you want to get them into treatment, you need to use guardianship. That is the way to do this. Otherwise, at some point, either something tragic will happen or the state simply won't give them back. Because right now, until you can take back control, you don't get to make any decisions. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you the way that it works. And again, to your point, Michael, and Victoria as well, every state does this differently. There are some states where it's a nightmare to get a guardianship, right? It could take forever. right?
New York,
I mean,
New York.
I mean, we actually have an ex parte piece to our guardianship. It's really difficult to get, but most of the times we are filing, in addition to permanent guardianship, we're filing for emergency temporary guardianship. That gets me into court anywhere between 3 to 5 days, and I don't need an expert. I could put the parents on to tell the court what's going on here, and the permanent guardianship sort of tracks it. So
That's an ex
Florida's a
parte
great.
order. You said that is
Well, you could do an ex parte. I don't know if we've ever been successful in one of those because they're, it's like you said, there's a whole civil liberties issue here,
yeah.
right? We want to give the person a hearing. So we can still file for an emergency guardianship, but that requires a hearing. But it doesn't necessarily require an expert like it did in Pennsylvania. I just bring the parents in to testify. This is what's going on.
Ask you this question just to wrap up this up. We definitely have to have you come back. We just have to. But I want to ask you a quick question. Again, Victoria and I put this podcast together because we really want to try to offer people some solutions. We could sit here, and I do it all the time, and a lot of families love to do it, is to bitch and complain about the issues that we see in the system. And one of the things that I think is important to point out in these conversations is that, yeah, let's get the grievances out there so that you realize that you're not alone, that this is not unique.
100%. You're not alone.
And I think that what's equally as important is to have conversations here on this podcast and podcasts like yours where people are offering solutions. And I know that we can't do that. What would you say is one thing that people should know is this is what it takes to, give us a good lesson or two quickly, in a synopsis of something that people should do right away to really get themselves out in front of some of this stuff?
Well, I mean, I tell families, especially moms and dads, to be nosy parents, right? If you get that sort of tingly feeling that something's wrong, you're probably right. But as lawyers, we need more than a tingly feeling to get us in front of a judge.
I've had a tingly feeling in years, Mark. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't help you with that one. But in any event, right, you got to find out what's really going on. Ask questions. If they become aloof, right? Are they spending time with people they never spent time with before? Are they unable to hold down a job? Are they flunking out of school? Have their eating habits changed? Are they sleeping all day and they're up all night? Right? Have you found evidence in a house of drug use? Have they admitted it? Have you seen it? Ask their friends. Be nosy. Find out what is going on, right? And then I don't have an issue with you sitting down with your loved one and saying, look, is there a problem here? This is what we're seeing. And if they acknowledge it, great. Then you can have a conversation about whether or not they're willing to get help. Because not everybody needs to call me and say, help me. I get that call when the family says they will not go to treatment or they will not stay in treatment or they won't take their medications, right? But if they're willing to do it, then great. You don't need me, which is a beautiful thing. I'm not needed on every single case, but you got to find out what's going on and you've got to address it. And one of the issues I deal with, Michael, is this sort of psychological component where either the family says, you know what, it'll pass. Or you get one parent says, it's fine, it'll just pass. Or dad says, no, I'm done. They're out the house. Goodbye. Well, enabling or kicking them out of the house doesn't solve the problem, right? If they're not able to make the decision to save themselves, then the parents have to come together and say, okay, we got to come together and we have to come up with a plan and we have to be the ones to make the decision. Otherwise, severe consequences happen, people die, or the state will step in. I mean, that's just the way it works. But I tell families, find out what's going on. Don't just say, oh, well, it's a phase. It ain't a phase. That's not how it works, right? It will get worse. That's how this disease works.
And that goes back to your gut feeling, the tingly stomach, you got a feeling going on and it's just something ain't right.
Right. They don't need you to be their friend. They need you to be their parent.
Yep. You're right. And I get it, and sometimes families say, well, they'll be mad at me. Well, my response to that is, number one, this is not your loved one. I know it looks like them and it sounds like them, but they ain't running the show. At some point in the past, their mind got hijacked and now the disease is running the show. So that's number one. Number two, they might be mad at you and it might be for 30 days. It might be for 90 days, but at some point that's going to change, but it's going to take a little time. And while they're doing their thing,
mad at you.
What's that?
At least they'll be here to be mad at you.
I've seen that. I had a family I worked with. Their son was smoking way too much marijuana, and the first time I saw them in the courtroom, he just got in my face. He was really not happy. 90 days later, I saw him again. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. It was a totally different kid. He's like, thank God. He's like, thank you for helping me. I was out of my mind, right? It just takes time for that to occur. And I think part of what we do, Michael, is saying to clients, look, this is what you can expect. And if they know it's coming down the pipe or might be coming down the pipe, it's not such a shock when their loved one says, F you, I'm not doing this, I hate you, I never want to speak to you again. Because that's shock for parents. So if you can prepare them and say, look, this is what might happen, this is what we've seen, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But just know if this is what happens, it's not unusual. It will change. And that's part of what we do as counselors, right? Is really giving our families counsel, which is why I get so frustrated, Michael, when I see lawyers coming into the space because they see the quick buck and they have no experience. They don't know what they're doing. And like you and I mean, we've been doing this for years and they don't warn the clients. They don't give them good counsel. It's not just about running to court and filing papers. It's a whole lot more than that because for the most part, you don't even need a lawyer to do that, right? Or you can go hire the cheap lawyer. But if you want the real solution, you got to find somebody that actually knows how this stuff works and they're willing to go the extra mile to come up with a game plan that can save your family. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but
No, that was,
I know when I
and-
met you, I said, holy smokes, this is a guy that's been doing this stuff for as long as me.
right. There's not too many of us, and that's
There isn't.
problem. But I think that's a perfect way to wrap up this part one of our discussion with Mark Astor, because I have a lot more notes that I've been writing down here. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and we are going to ask Mark to come back for our next episode. And because he and I are talk about unicorns, Mark and I are unicorns in this field, and I'm just happy to meet a kindred spirit in it. And thanks a lot for being here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Well, Michael, I enjoyed getting to know you. We've only just we've sort of connected in the last month, and I'm grateful for the work that you do because it does take a village, and it takes people that a lawyer in Pennsylvania or a lawyer in Connecticut. We just can't do this alone, and so I'm grateful for you, and thank you for allowing me to come on here and share what I do.